All right, I'd like to call this meeting of the West Allis West Milwaukee School District to order, please. If we could please rise for the pledge. And Mrs. Justin, could you please lead us?
Yes. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United
of the
States
United States of America
and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you, everybody. And we would like to thank Dan Bailey for joining us today. Today, we would like to do a nice tribute to Dan to thank him for his years of service in the West Allis West Milwaukee School District. So if you'll permit me just a few moments here to read our prepared tribute. Whereas the conclusion of public service of Dan Bailey, Board of Education member, School District of West Allis West Milwaukee et al., on Monday, May 18th, 2020, will historically be recorded as being a total of 9 years of significant educational contributions to this school district. And whereas he has, with exceptional spirit, self-dedication, and a community-minded philosophy, contributed significantly to the development and enrichment of the educational and recreational programs of this school district, to the end that those who participated have grown in knowledge, skills, and the enjoyment of living. And whereas during his tenure of service to the school district and community, he did provide strong leadership, guidance, and management skills to improve the instructional and recreational programs while filling the following vacancies as a school board member. As treasurer, he served as 4 years, committee chair of communications and public relations for 1 year, committee chair of personnel for 1 year, and committee chair for recreation and community services for 6 years. Committee vice chair in communications and public relations for 2 years, personnel services for 1 year, recreation and community services for 1 year, service to our stakeholders and community for 2 years, and student services for 1 year. Dan also provided countless hours of research and effort in the constant improvement of the educational and recreational programs for this school district. And whereas his example of public commitment, unfailing energy, and intellectual curiosity has provided inspiration and admiration to all whose lives have been touched by association with him, and in particular to his many Board of Education colleagues and members of the education profession. Now therefore be it resolved that we, the members of the Board of Education of the School District of West Allis West Milwaukee et al., honor this man for his notable contributions to the fields of public education and public recreation by his self-dedication to the principle of public service, his professional integrity, his personal interest in the education and recreational needs of the school district, and that this expression of our warm appreciation and affection be formally recorded and presented to Dan Bailey. And be it further resolved that a copy of this testimonial be formally recorded in the official minutes of the Board of Education of the School District of West Allis West Milwaukee et al., and signed by present officers and members of the Board of Education. Please help me in thanking Dan Bailey for his time serving this community.
Hey, Dan, thank you.
Thank you.
Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Stephanie.
Dan. We're working with you.
Stephanie, I just have a few words to say, Stephanie, and I really appreciate it from the heart. You know, young lady, you've been a really good leader, and I know you will continue to be that. I would like to take just a moment to bid you farewell. Throughout the progress and turmoil, from the discussions to the battles, I have found great joy in this opportunity to serve the West Allis, West Milwaukee community as a school board member. I will miss serving, but wish the current and new board members best wishes. It has been a pleasure to serve as a school board member for the past 9 years. My purpose on the board was to serve the students in the community and foster a working relationship with educators, and I did just that on a constant basis. I have seen, experienced, and learned a lot over the past several years, and I'm proud of the work accomplished. My daily interactions with educators, parents, and students will be what I miss the most. I truly hope you take encouragement from our progress. Continue to build strong relationships and among the community, and choose your battles carefully to win the wars that really make a difference in the lives of each and every student. I cannot leave without saying a few thank yous. Thank you to the board members, district and building staff, and parents who have taken the time to work together to ensure a better education for our children. Lastly, but most importantly, to my wife, Pam, and my family, who have fully supported my passion in calling to serve the school district of West Allis, West Milwaukee. I pray that I served and provided you the support that was needed to do a job well done. May God bless you and have a good night.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you for all your time and all your service. It's
was
definitely
awesome.
noted, and it'll be
It was
felt for
awesome.
a long time.
All the best to you.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Upward and onward to new things.
Right.
All right.
New chapter, right?
Artie, thank you.
Take
You're
care,
welcome.
Dan.
See you again, Dan.
Take care.
We will then move on to our roll call for the evening. Suzette?
Ms. Klug,
Here.
Mr. Schultz,
Here.
Ms. Kaiser,
Here.
Mr. Lee,
Here.
Mr. Ustruck,
Here.
Mrs. Justum,
Here.
Mr. Sikich,
Present.
Mr. Keller,
Here.
and President Emmons.
Here. Proper notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the open meeting laws of the state of Wisconsin. Do we have any additions or modifications to tonight's agenda?
I have no changes.
All right, we will then move on to item 7, our public comments. Do we have any public comments from those who are joining us online today? Seeing none, we will then move on to item 8, the superintendent's report. Dr. Lexman.
Great, thank you. So in the legislative update, we're all pretty familiar with all of the news that keeps changing our lives, but so last week, the Wisconsin Supreme Court overturned the Safer at Home orders. That was on Wednesday, May 13th. It was a 4-3 decision of the Supreme Court, ruled to strike down Safer at Home orders put in place by Governor Evers. The court also mandated that all future statewide restrictions to battle the coronavirus must be approved by the legislature's rulemaking committee before they could be implemented. And while the stay-at-home order was declared unlawful by the court's majority, Rogensack wrote, without explanation, that schools would remain closed. We did just recently, probably 10, 15 minutes ago, received a big kind of interpretation from Bulow Vetter. That's one of the law firms we work with. And there are other statutes that currently exist that provides the director of the Wisconsin Department of Health Services to be able to close schools and other public places during an epidemic. So that's why that was not included. The court's ruling means it now falls to officials in the state's 72 counties and local municipalities to manage their community's response to COVID-19. The 18 municipalities in suburban Milwaukee County and their 10 public health officials came together to sign a local order that provides guidelines on how local businesses can move forward in the coming days. The order lasts through May 21st, 2020. And one of the questions that I just emailed back to Claire Hartley, one of the attorneys that worked on that guidance, was given that schools are closed for instruction and extracurricular activities. We can still run essential government functions out of them. But it leaves open the question, can we use them for recreational activities? Because those aren't officially extracurricular tied to a school. So we're going to try to get guidance on that, because I think the board's aware we're surveying parents right now about interest in face-to-face versus virtual summer school, and would they participate in a summer camp if it could be held face-to-face. And there's more support for the face-to-face options than I anticipated. And so if we're allowed, we may want to try to figure it out, doing it in a safe way, small numbers of kids. There's a lot to adapt and adjust to, but I think we're learning what these orders or the change of the orders means every day and sometimes by the hour. All right, so let me jump back. There are no recognitions this week, as we have 2 board meetings back to back, really close together. But a couple just updates. I've talked about these before, but who's ever kind of engaged listening, for the public, that graduation, we are intending to follow the Department of Health Services guidance, which really only supports kind of 2 variations of a drive up or drive through graduation ceremony. Beth Kaler is doing a really nice job organizing speeches and videos, and so we will produce a little documentary sort of that we'll then give to all kids and families. The senior signs, those are out in yards, so we'd be proud of that all of our seniors that came to pick up caps and gowns got a sign for their yard. The 8th grade signs that announce 8th graders that are completing, those will get finished and out into yards this week. And then when we are doing the return of devices and picking up belongings, that's when we'll distribute the signs for 5th graders, so that we recognize, celebrate all of the young people that are going to be making transitions in their education. But we're trying to spread it out so we don't have too many people in and out of schools all at the same time, just to learn how we manage these kind of moments. And that is my update. So that concludes the superintendent's report.
All right, thank you, Dr. Lexman. All right, we move on to item 9, the board president's report. Taking a look at the board calendar. So today is May 18th, and we have a regular Board of Education meeting. Immediately following that, we do have a closed session. On next week, we have no meeting. It is Memorial Day. And then we will have on Monday, June 1st at 6 o'clock, we will have a workshop, College and Career Readiness, on the English Language Arts Adoption. On Monday, June 8th, starting at 6 p.m., we have a regular Board of Education meeting. On Monday, June 15th at 6 p.m., there is a TBD workshop, so the more information to be coming on that shortly. On Monday, June 22nd at 6 p.m., we have a regular Board of Education meeting as well. Do any board members have any updates or community events that they would like to notice? Jeff?
Not that I want to add, I just have a question for you, Madam President. On the TBA, do we have an idea of what might be presented that night?
I did not know that one was actually on the calendar until I read the board calendar, so I'm not positive what that topic is. Marty, do you know what topic that's going to be on that date?
You're muted.
Still muted. There you go.
That I just ordered the wrong or opened the wrong document. Sorry, and I was muted. So we have a.
On the 15th.
I don't.
No big deal. I was just wondering.
Mm-hmm.
So more information to come on that one.
Yep.
Just want to keep us in suspense.
That's right. Best work comes in suspense. Okay. So any other board members have any other community events or any questions on the calendar? If not, we will move on to item 10, the consent agenda for the evening. There are 4 items. Item 10.1, the approval of minutes from the May 11th regular Board of Education meeting. Item 10.2, the employment summary. Item 10.3, the supplementary contracts. And item 10.4, the financial summary. Does anyone need anything separated?
Move to accept.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions? Not all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you very much. We move on to item 11, our action items for this evening. Item 11.1, the individual contract extensions of administrators and at-will employees.
Yeah, so similar to our meeting last week, this is another annual item that we bring back around. So like we do with teachers, it gives us the authority on then to offer contract extensions. So administrators in Wisconsin have 2-year rolling contracts, and then our at-will employees are 1-year employment agreements. And we got a little bit behind on this one in the middle of everything else. So we've got some of our leaders that are getting nervous, asking, are we getting contracts for next year? And so we wanted to make sure we take this step. And so that, people aren't worried about that. There'll be enough for us to figure out going forward.
Any questions for Dr. Lexman? Matt, we'd look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions? Not all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you very much. We will then move on to our workshop for the evening, our financial stability and efficiency, taking a look at our 2018-2019 audit review. Ms. Windler.
All right. So with us tonight, we have our auditors from Baker Tilly. Michelle Walter is with us, and Wendy Unger is in another meeting, and we'll be jumping on this one shortly. So we do this annually, and we review the previous financial year's audit results. I know this is a few months earlier, but this one took a little bit longer for a few reasons. So,
Did everybody leave?
are you able to share your screen?
Yeah. Did you see the baby at all?
Bill, your mic is on.
Oh my God.
Sorry, Bill, we loved it.
Well, that was awesome.
He goes. So Michelle Walter is joining us tonight. Michelle, are you able to share your screen, or do you want me to share?
I'm going to go ahead and give it a try, and hopefully you'll all see it. Caitlin, did they get a copy of the PowerPoint
Yes,
as
it
well?
was attached. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Let me just make sure I find the right thing.
He did. Yeah.
Okay, does everyone see it?
Yep.
PowerPoint? Okay. As Caitlin mentioned, I'm Michelle Walter from Baker Tilly. We are the external auditors starting this year for the district. So, I think a lot of new has gone on this year with Caitlin and her team, as well as the new audit team that was on board. And I'm sure we brought a lot of new things to light, and, some Caitlin appreciated, some probably wanted us to go away. But as you mentioned, we're going to do an overview kind of the audit and the financial statements and everything that took place from there. So this is our agenda, kind of very high level information that we're going to go through. We're going to go through the audit results with some high level financial information, some of the compliance reports, control related items that we came across, and any questions that you may have. Don't feel like you have to wait till the end of anything to ask any questions. So as they pop up, feel free to ask them. I know Caitlin mentioned that this is probably a little later than what the board would typically see an audit presentation for, but there are various factors in getting financial data out and claim forms being filed, and we're to a point where we're good financial numbers. So that's the overall intent of all of this. So that is what we are presenting. So the objective of our audit is to be able to issue an opinion on the financial statements of the district. And we were able to do that. We issued what is called an unmodified audit opinion, which is basically that the financial statements are free of any material misstatements. They include all the required disclosures, and that accounting principles have been consistently applied. The one item that is a little different this year than you may have seen in the past years is this emphasis of matter paragraph. And I failed to mention, but if you have your financial statements in front of you, the opinion's on pages 1 through 3. And this emphasis of matter paragraph, this is where we would call out if there are any new accounting standards that are implemented, or in this case, there was a restatement of the 2018 financial statements. And this is detailed out on page 41 of the financial statements, but the big picture of this is there was a new standard that was implemented in fiscal year 2018 related to recording other post-employment benefits. This is not a transaction that gets recorded in the district's general fund, and it's what we call a topside adjustment. So it's a district-wide statement similar to long-term debt or capital assets. So there was a portion that did not get reported as what is called a deferred outflow of resources. So overall, it doesn't have an impact to the operating statements of the district, but we have to call your attention to it. It amounted to about $4.4 million, but like I said, balance sheet only transaction. So some of the other things that we do, it's not just the financial statements that get issued, but there are a couple other reports within the reports themselves. The first one is the communication to those charged with governance and management. And this is a separate PDF document that I believe you should have received. It's shorter than the financial statement document. It's about 30 pages. And this is where we include some of our required communications to you as the board. So the first thing that we have to communicate are any material weaknesses. So this is surrounding a lot of internal control structure, or in this case, I mentioned the restatement. This is not any one particular person's fault that this restatement happened. I mean, prior auditors probably should have caught that it was not recorded, but the standards are pretty clear that if there is a restatement, that it is a material weakness. So I fully anticipate this to go away next year and not have a similar material weakness. The next one is internal control over financial reporting. And once again, this is a material weakness that is not uncommon for school districts. This is because we, your auditors, prepare your financial statements as well as make material journal entries. This is considered a material weakness. So unless something were to drastically change and Caitlin and her team want to take over doing financial statements and have no journal entries of material nature, you will have this. But there is no downside to having this material weakness. And like I said, it is fairly common. The next material weakness is internal control environment. And this is probably more what you may know as segregation of duties. So with the size staff that the district has, there are some functions that don't have the proper review taking place. So if one person does it, another set of eyes should either do the next step or review what they did. So there are some payroll transactions that I think we lacked proper approval, but I know in all of these cases, we've worked with Caitlin already to start and transition to some more strengthened controls. So there are a couple payroll items with timesheets and being approved, as well as payroll registers. So after payroll is run, just to making sure, you know, the right rates are used, that individuals that are getting paid are proper, and just the second set of eyes. There's also a couple items over disbursements and journal entries. You know, if Caitlin makes a journal entry, someone should be reviewing it. And I believe that's one that, Caitlin, you have already started that process, that someone is reviewing your journal entries. Yep. So once again, not an uncommon situation to have for a school district of your size. I mean, unless you want to hire more people who are knowledgeable and can do it, great, this goes away, but not a lot changes. I mean, the risk is always there. So it's a cost benefit situation that you want to weigh. The next item that we have to communicate is any significant deficiencies. So these are items that are similar in the control nature, but they don't rise to that level of a material weakness. We did a lot of testing over purchase card transactions during the year. And the district does have a purchase card manual that we found a couple instances where that manual isn't necessarily being followed. So controls in place like obtaining signed agreements from the card holder and reviewing those transactions, as well as not handing out my card for another individual to use. Things like that are specified in the policy, but that is not taking place. I think one of the other items that we came across a few times is purchasing gift cards with the district purchase cards. And I know that this has been a hot topic, and Caitlin, I think you've worked to kind of get away from buying the gift cards in general. So all of these things will strengthen your internal control environment and reduce that risk that something bad could happen. So moving along kind of page by page through this second 30-page document, the next section we have is any other comments or recommendations. And these
Michelle,
are just, yeah.
Just a question before you go on, going back to the P cards.
Yeah.
I should know the answer to this, but I don't. Or maybe it's for Caitlin or Marty too. Who in our district gets or receives a P card and has authority to use one?
Yep, it's basically all directors, and principals. And then there are departments too that have P cards. So I guess that's not a straight, super simple answer, but so like every principal has one, and then a school also has one that's assigned to the school. So the
And who
secretary
would kind of control that? The secretary?
the secretary, but every single P card transaction has to have the supervisor's approval on it.
Okay,
Yeah, a
thank you.
signature.
I
So
wasn't sure how many there are floating around out there.
yeah, and it's not like departments, meaning like science department has one. That's not the case. It's our communications and
Sure.
our curriculum department and our HR. So
Thank you.
Okay, so like I was mentioning before, these other comments and recommendations, these are things that are not necessarily material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, but can help the district strengthen controls or processes that are in place. So typically we have some IT best practices that, once again, these are all cost benefit analysis to implement. But especially in working in these times today and everything being electronic and hackers doing a lot of, fancy things, IT best practices are key. We ran into some issues with backdating payments to June 30th to get the expense in the correct year. And really that kind of screws up some of your cash things, but we've worked through that. And I believe going forward, we have a plan to not do that. And then the last kind of comment or recommendation is taking a look at some of the liability accounts that exist and determining what are the actual balances, as we couldn't pinpoint the exact dollar amounts in them. None were of material nature, but they're going to be looked at and reconciled out. The next section in this report is two-way communication regarding your audit. And this is really us as your auditors reaching out to you, the board, kind of planning for next year's audit. We don't want the audit just to be a year-end thing where you think about it come June 30th or when we present this audit. So, both mine and Wendy, the partner on the engagement's contact information is included in here. If you have any questions or concerns or something pops up during the year that you think, I don't know if this sounds right, or I'd like to get someone else's opinion, reach out to us. We're kind of looking for your feedback or anything of that nature. The next section is required communications that we are required to have with you. And this is pretty much stated. We need to say this happened or this didn't happen. And some of the main items that are in this section of the report are we have to disclose if there are any change in accounting policies, which for fiscal year 19, there were none. Any estimates that are included in the financial statements. So this is something along the lines of compensated absences or depreciation or some of the net pension liabilities and OPEB liabilities. Those are the main estimates that the district has, that there's some estimation out there in the numbers. We are required to communicate any misstatements, whether they be corrected or uncorrected, and the district did correct all the misstatements that we came up with during the audit, so their financial statements and records reflect what's in the financial statements and what should be there. If there were any difficulties or disagreements with management, which there were none, I'm sure we would have had communications before we met in this case. So happy to report that there were none. And then we also have to note independence, that we are independent of the district and that the district is independent of us as the auditors. So the last section of this 30-page document is the management representation letter. And this is the representations from the district saying the information that was provided to us is accurate to their knowledge, that we provided everything necessary. We didn't withhold anything that would cause a liability. So it's kind of your assurances to us that the information we have is accurate. So that's that communication letter document. Lots of information, lots of words on the pages, but some procedures and recommendations that will help out in the long run.
Michelle, before you move on to the next slide, can I just go through what we're doing with in response to the audit findings? So thanks for laying all that out. We are proud to say that while we do still have, I think, was it 10 audit findings this time, we have decreased from last audit. And it's now also one of our goals in our strategic plan to continue to decrease each year over the next 5 years. And I have no doubt that we can get there. We've certainly wiped out a couple from the previous year that we had spent a significant amount of time working through and creating processes that were thorough and didn't leave any holes. So while we've gotten rid of some, we obviously still have more to work on. But one of the items that Michelle mentioned was control over P cards, purchase cards. So that was one that we spent a significant amount of time developing. So we had the manual, but throughout the course of the year, we've been working with our teams, our secretary team, our principal team, our managers team, to make sure that we have the right trainings in place for what's in that manual. So it's not just like, here, sign this, good luck. So we've been working through that. And like Michelle said too, like part of that was no gift cards, which was a huge project for us. So working through the ways that we can show that we show our appreciation besides gift cards. And then working through not having tax on our purchases and how we can best go about that in ways that we're not trying to make everybody's lives harder. We're just trying to have cleaner audit processes. We worked through, one of our audit findings was, like Michelle mentioned, was a control over journal entries. So now I don't just post them. Now we have our accountant she's the one who enters them, and then I approve and post them. So we have 2 sets of eyes on them. So those are types of things that we've been implementing and throughout the year too. So some of these we learned about at the end of March when we received our audit, but some of these we've been working on throughout the course of the year too. So while I anticipate some of these go away, I still think that at the end of this fiscal year that we're in now, that's coming to an end actually, that we'll still have some, but we're still certainly working towards cleaning them up. And I think that this audit's going to be much better than the one we're even presenting now too.
You're trending in the right direction. That's all that's important. You're not going to be able to knock out everything at once. It's steps, and you're going in the right direction. Okay. So the next piece is the single audit report. And this is included in the actual financial statement document in the back. So it starts on page 68 of your financial statements. And this single audit report is a report on the federal and state grants and program awards you receive. So certain programs have different requirements that we have to test compliance for and report back to the granting agencies. So there are findings that get noted as well in this single audit report. All of the significant deficiencies and material weaknesses that I noted prior all have to be findings in that single audit report, but it's just, it goes to separate organizations, so that's why it's reiterated. Once we look at the actual program findings, there is a total of 6 findings, I believe, and all of which are things that are not material in nature or are not fixable. So that's the key. One of the findings is related to documentation and review of reports that get submitted. I mean, that's going to be the key to your control processes, is making sure it looks like somebody looked at it that wasn't the original preparer. So any type of reports that go out the door, that's always one to keep in mind. Second finding was for the state special education grants, and this was related to an employee that did not have a valid license. So every year DPI sends a list of, here are all of the employees with no valid license, and we have to report back how much they got paid. One of the next findings is related to authorized wages, and once again, we talked about controls over payroll, and this is something that annually you can put together. These are the approved wages for individuals, and just have something signed off and official. Like I said, a lot of these things are documentation that, you know, if we can't see it as auditors, we can't say it exists. There was a Medicaid finding, and this is related to consent forms from parents, and 26 out of the 40 we selected didn't have signed consent forms. So going forward, this is a finding that you just got to make sure you have the right documentation, especially when it comes to special ed students, as that's where a lot of the single audit testing happens. And then the last two findings revolve around a new program, the School Safety Initiative, which I can tell you every school district had findings on this because I think the communication with Wisconsin Department of Justice was lacking and reporting was never consistent. So there was some timely reporting as well as school safety drills that were not completed. So that's kind of the non-financial information data. Does anyone have any questions on any of those items? If not, we're going to move to the high level financial statement information. So what you see on the screen now is an overview of the general fund. So the main operating fund of the district. And I want to just put a disclaimer out there that in the past, your general fund has included both your general fund and your special education fund. So these are two funds that are separated out normally, but in the past you had them combined. So if you were trying to compare apples to apples by looking at your general fund on your balance sheet and income statement, you wouldn't be looking at the same thing this year. So if you ever hold them next to each other, this year will be off. But in your financial statements, page 57 is going to have the detail of the general fund and the budget to actual comparison. So total revenues that were budgeted were 100, these are all in thousands. So 107,918 million, I believe. I'm an accountant that's not great with numbers, I guess. Compared to expenditures of 107,418. So the budget was to add to fund balance $500,000. What actually happened was adding to fund balance $5.3 million. So that was a positive. So if we're looking at what's on your page 57 of the financial statements, your revenues were over budget by about 3.1 million. A lot of that revolved around increased equalization aid payments and per pupil aid payments. There were some decreases in some areas relating to timing of claims for federal awards, but overall, like I said, positive to budget of 3.1 million. When we look at the expenditures, just the general expenditures, not including transfers, there was $90 million actual, $95 million budgeted. And one other thing I want to note on this budget schedule is we have total instruction and total support services. When Caitlin and I were working together to try and put the budget to actual schedule together, there were a lot of versions of a budget floating around that we had to take what we found was approved. So this was from the publication dating back to, I would think it would have been October 2017.
2018.
Yeah. So normally we would see a lot more detailed level broken down, but that's why we have total instruction, total support services, and that $90,500,000 is very comparative to where you were at in the past. So it went up maybe $100,000. So very consistent to where you were at in the past, and under the budget that is set forth here by about $4.8 million. So another positive. There is, it transfers out then for the general fund. It was budgeted at $12 million and actually came in at $15.1 million. So monies that are transferred out to different funds. 9.3 million of this is the transfer to cover the deficit in the special education fund, which we'll look at on the next slide. Payments to the debt service fund of 5.2 million, as well as some funding to the long-term capital improvement fund of 650,000. So overall, that the general fund started the year with fund balance of $38 million and ended the year at $43.4 million. This $43 million is broken out into a couple categories listed at the bottom of this slide. So $31,000 is non-spendable because it's in the form of a prepaid. So the cash is out the door but the expenditure is not flowing through the fund balance yet. It's all balance sheet. This $24.48 million is assigned by management, and that is the payoff of the 2016 promissory notes. So that was come due, I believe it was April 2020. So that was a big chunk of money that had to go out the door. And so it's not in the unassigned category, which is what is basically used for spending at the district's discretion. So the 18.9 million is what we call unassigned, which is money used for operating purposes. And this is currently at 20% of the current year budgeted expenditure. So that's a good unassigned fund balance position. So you have plenty of wiggle room there. Oh, I went back. This next slide briefly summarizes the other funds of the district. So the Special Education Fund, Capital Projects Fund, and Community Service Funds are all what we call major funds. So based on the dollars that are flowing through here, they are separated out individually. This non-major fund is the smaller funds that can be combined in the front of your statements, but in the back, they get detailed out in a combining statements, but it's your debt service fund, your gift fund, and your food service fund. So I mentioned before that there was...
Dean.
Hey, Jeff, how you doing? Doing good, you?
I mentioned before that there was a transfer of $9.3 million to the Special Education Fund. That's this fund that cannot operate at a deficit or have a fund balance in it. So when expenditures were more than the money brought in, the general fund has to cover that. So that's why there's no fund balance there. The Capital Projects Fund had an overall increase to fund balance of $1.6 million. And this was a combination of the land sale, the $6.7 million that was in there, as well as $100,000 of interest, and then the $650,000 I mentioned before for the long-term capital improvement fund. The expenditures of the $5.7 million were your McKinstry project for all of the school sites and the HVAC and lighting. So overall, like I said, you added $1.6 million. Fund balance started at $8.4 million and ended at $10 million. 7.9 million of this is restricted for those capital projects, which leaves committed. I'm sorry, there's a difference. Restricted is externally. Restricted by, in this case, it's going to be bond proceeds or debt issuances. And so there is $2.1 million of unspent bond proceeds in that fund. So those have to be used for that purpose. The remaining fund balance is used for the capital projects that the district decides on.
Michelle, do you mind if I just jump in for a second?
Go ahead.
Just to put it in terms that we've been using so that you can kind of put a connect the dots. So this was the building sale, like Michelle mentioned, so that we put that in our Fund 46. And the Fund 46 is also, we put the building sale in Fund 49 for future capital projects. And then Fund 46 is also in this category that we're talking through here. And that is where our field turf replacement plan monies are. So that's what we're talking about in this capital projects fund. It's the combination of those funds.
Okay. So the last major fund is the Community Service Fund. And overall, sorry for the dog. The budget, the district budgeted to use $3 million out of this fund in 2019 and actually added to fund balance of $668,000. So overall fund balance ended at $7.5 million, all but $10,000 is restricted for these community service projects, and the $9,800 is for prepaids, again, like I mentioned. So those non-major funds that I mentioned before, these are their ending fund balances. So there is $3.7 million of debt service funds that are restricted. Your special revenue gift funds have $581,000, and the food service fund has $2.2 million. So a couple additional items that are either large in the financial statements or that we just want you to know as the board. The district has a debt limit of 10% of the equalized value. So you have the ability to borrow $456 billion. That sounds high, which if you ever got to that point, I'm sure you'd be having other conversations, but your current borrowing is $48.5 million. So the net pension liability found on page 41 of your financial statements, this is the district's share of the state pension plan. And so this year there's a liability of $12.5 million for your proportion, but this one is very volatile in that it changes every year. So last year it was an asset because of their investment earnings. This year the earnings didn't do as well as they had hoped, so it shifted to a liability. So these aren't necessarily funds that you need to pay out. It's if everyone were to retire on this date, that would be the liability, but odds of that happening are very, very slim. But once again, this is not in your general operating funds. It is in what the district-wide statements, along with the long-term debt. The total OPEB liability is on page 48 of the financial statements, and this is the OPEB related to health for your employees and retirees. This is all based on an actuarial valuation, and the current liability is $54 million. The net OPEB liability on page 51, this is the state life insurance portion. So that liability, similar to that pension liability, but this program isn't as nicely funded as pension. So it's been a liability for the past 2 years, but it's $2.2 million at the end of this year. So that's all the general information that I kind of have to go through. Do you guys have any questions or items I can help you out with?
I just want to give a shout out to Wendy and Michelle, your team, because we had a lot to work through this year, and thanks for hanging in there with us, and we're really getting it cleaned up. So I just really appreciate that you've been hanging in there and helping us work through improvements in our processes.
Well, I need to say the same thing for you and your team, because you were in your first full year and you walked into all these questions that we're asking and trying to dig up information, and there was never any hesitation to find the right information. So it was great to work with your team, and it's only going to get better.
Thank you.
Just wanted to quickly mention, I apologize for my delay in starting. I had a call at 6 also. But as Michelle mentioned during the presentation, if there is any questions, anything you'd like to talk through, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Our contact information is included on this last page of the presentation. So please feel free to contact either one of us to talk about anything that you feel warrants a discussion. Don't hesitate.
Any questions or comments for our team? Thank you all very much for the help and the work and the guidance. As Caitlin said, lots of things being worked on, and lots of, we're pleased but not satisfied. So there you go. So lots of progress, but lots of work to do. So thank you for knowing that you are our partners along the way and helping to guide us. So we look forward to continuing to work with you guys and growing and getting even better at our jobs. So thank you very much. All right. Anything else on that, Caitlin?
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, so that
I think Jeff is, yeah. Jeff, you're on.
Oh, I didn't hear my name called. Caitlin, just want to thank you for all your work through all of this, because it takes somebody that's organized to get all the information for them. You've done a fantastic job.
Okay, so that is the end of the workshop. So we will take a quick 5-minute break and come back onto the other link for executive session in just a few minutes. So 6:50, so we'll meet back up on that link and start at 6:55. All right, thanks, everybody. We're at recess.